Hi everyone, welcome to another sociology lecture. I am Dr. Dilsora Fozilova, and in today's lecture we will be talking about culture and socialization. So what's culture? When we're born, we're automatically entering to the world that already has rules, it has belief systems, it has traditions, the way of doing things, way of thinking. None of us start with a blank slate. We are immediately surrounded by culture. Culture shapes the way we think, what we value, how we interact, and even how we view ourselves or how we see ourselves. But culture alone isn't enough. We must learn it, practice it, and internalize it. That's where socialization comes in. So, socialization is a lifelong process where through which we absorb our culture, learning not just language and customs, but also deeper ideas of right and wrong, and success and failure, and belonging and identity. From families and peers to schools and workplaces and universities and people we interact with, all of them teaches us how to fit in this world or fit in and how to see the world. Often we study culture and socialization together because these two concepts are inseparable. Culture provides the content and socialization provides the process. So without culture, we would have nothing to learn. Without socialization, culture would not survive. We will just lose our culture or it will die out. So understanding this dynamic helps us to see why individuals behave the way they do. The way societies reproduce themselves across generations and how change, sometimes slow, sometimes radical, happens or occurs. So today we will talk about how do we define culture, what are the key components of culture, through what agents and stages do we become socialized, what happens to when socialization breaks down or when societies collide. According to Ralph Linton's 1945 publication, the culture of a society is the way of life or its members, the collection of ideas and habits which they learn, share, and transmit from generations to generations. I'm reading, it's a direct quote. So, according to Ralph Linton, it is the culture of a society. So, cultures can be different for different societies or different groups of people. And it is not only material and non-material things, it can be all different habits we have or ideas we have and traditions we have and knowledge we have, skills we have. Those, all of them can be part of our culture. So what kind of components culture have? Culture, we can divide culture into material culture and non-material culture. So when the societies started, they started to live in different parts of the world. So they started to make a shelter for themselves. In the beginning, they were maybe living in the mountains or beside the rivers. So if they lived in the mountains, so they made their homes from maybe the wood or trees in the mountain. Maybe they used the herbs of the mountain for their cooking, and their practices were based on or their practices was kind of fitting in their environment. So their culture that they were developing was different culture than the people who lived beside the rivers. They probably had more like, fish and other seafood in their recipes, that cultural recipes or kitchen, which in the forest people maybe had more hunting and gathering. The way they're living was just kind of based on where they live. And the slowly they start to learn how to make tools. And every time when they made a tool, that's supposed to help them to live in their environment. Maybe they started to make axes in the forests to cut trees, and they called it axes. So that means that it was created, that was part of the culture. They took raw materials from the culture and the nature, and then they made it a culture. Axes, they can cut trees, they can use it for cutting the meat or other things. So that served multiple purposes. So therefore, also they called it X. So they created the tool at the same time, they created a name for it so other people can understand it. That is a symbol. So we communicate through symbols and language, our culture. That's the base of our culture. Language is a very important part of culture. So material culture are the tangible things that we can touch, our clothes, our homes, our dishes, our food. Those are tangible aspects of culture. Non-material culture is intangible aspects of culture. They are non-physical. Maybe they are the recipes of the food we make, that we know that the food is a material culture, and the recipe and how to do it is a non-material culture. Maybe a book is a material culture, and the whole thing, the ideas we get from the book or the story is non-material culture. And also there's dance can be in non-material culture. The belief systems can be non-material culture. All these churches we have, synagogues we have, mosques we have is material culture. But the ideas, the beliefs we have about our religion is non-material culture. Sometimes that material and non-material culture can overlap. For example, money can be material culture. Also, money can be in your bank as a number. It's just a kid abstract idea, right? And also it can be in the form of something. So wealth can be in the form of something. So elements of culture is learned, shared, transmitted, adapted. They are dynamic, they are symbolic. So culture is something very, very dynamic. So also we want to understand, if we understand culture, we want to understand what subcultures are, what actually, how they emerge, and what are countercultures. The culture we have in our society, the mainstream culture we have. For example, in Canada, we have many different cultures, right? However, when you go out there, some sort of mainstream culture exists, that all of us doing similar things, all of us interacting with social institutions, all of us wearing certain kinds of clothes. It creates the culture of that society. And there is some cultures that stands out. They're a little bit different than how people are in our society. They called subcultures. A subculture is defined by Farley in 1990 published book. It is set of cultural characteristics shared among a group within a society that are distinct in some ways from the larger culture within which the group exists, but also have features in common with a larger culture, it says. I'm reading it, it's a direct quote. So subcultures they are participating in this culture. They are not against this culture, but certain choices they make, maybe clothing choices and belief systems and the way they talk, the choice of music can stand out. We recognize them when we see them. For example, Gothic culture. That is like the way they dress, the way they talk, the way they hold themselves. That is kind of stands out in the culture. That's why we give them name and we exactly know how they look, right? And the countercultures are a little bit different than cultures. Countercultures kind of opposed to the mainstream culture. Their norms and values are not just different, as in the case of subculture, but are contrary to the accepted norms and values. For example, if we in our society, the norm is to going and getting education, and everybody kind of says that education is a good thing, right? The counterculture can be like, education is bad thing, like it's, and I'm just coming up with making up this idea. So they stand out with their ideas, and also in some way they are opposing to the mainstream culture. Cultures are different than society. So we need to differentiate between what is culture and what is society. So we said that culture refers to the shared beliefs and practices and material artifacts within a social group, encompassing the meaningful components of group interaction. Society is different. In one society, there can be many different cultures. For example, think about Canada. We have all different cultures exist in society. So how do we define society then? So society is a group of individuals interacting within a common bounded territory or region, representing a social structures, processes, and organization of people who share those cultural elements. So the main thing about society, the difference between culture and society, is the society has bounded territory. So Canadian borders are the definition or the limits for this Canadian society. We cannot call the outside of Canadian borders, it's a Canadian society. It can be like a American society, US society, right? So we have to be in that bounded territories. And also another thing about society is we share certain social structures. For example, our social institutions, the healthcare system, the education system, the government, the politics, and the law, and they are same for this within these boundaries. For culture, it's not the same. The culture is all different cultures live in this society, and they follow these social institutions. They interact with social institutions. They follow this law. They don't break the laws, like hopefully not. So laws are the same for all cultures within Canadian society. So for your exam, I would love you to understand the difference between culture and society. And the cultures always change, yet they are stable. We talked about social norms in our last class. So the social norms that is very ingrained in our cultures. So when the society started, as we mentioned, that cultures started as well. The people were creating tools and foods and clothes and shelters and everything they need. They were slowly creating them. The technologies, the furniture, and each of them was kind of coming from the experience of those people. Maybe that the sitting on the ground was meaningful for certain cultures. Therefore, they encouraged their people to sit on the ground level to have conversation or to have food. Or maybe sitting on the chairs was meaningful for other cultures. Therefore, they encouraged that kind of culture. So cultures starts to change as people change, and people's change and the cultures change is kind of dialectical. As we create culture, the culture changes us. We change them back. It's just a dialectical process. So the cultures we created in the past will change over time. People come and go, and then these cultures become objectified. That means the rules we created in the past, now it is kind of rules, we just accept them, right? It's objectified or normalized in society. In certain cases, those rules become institutionalized. For example, that family as an institution or education as an institution wasn't as solid as we have today in the past. So people just had some sort of education to pass the skills they have to their next generations. In today's world, we have very organized education system that kids go to school at certain age and they start doing with certain practices, learning alphabet and learning numbers, for example, very organized patterns of people. As I mentioned, that people come and go, and then these rules and norms and the cultures will solidify and become institutionalized. So then it's harder to change them. Yet society is always changing. If we didn't have a social change, then we would stay where we are in the past, that when the culture is created, that everything would stay in there. But no, we change all the time, every day. And you can argue that social norms are very solid. They are very hard to change. And you're right when you say that. So we live in society where we are changing all the time, yet our society is very stable. The social institutions stay the way, like their structures and functions often stay the same for a long time. And sometimes they can change too. For example, social media is a newer social institution, and it's changing all the time because of the technologies we have. Technologies are changing, how we interact changing. Sometimes social institutions change, or maybe their functions change, and some of the functions move to a next or different social institution. So the globalization, which we are going to talk in our next classes, globalization is one of the things that mixed cultures, so cultures start to change. When we travel from one place to another, we will experience different cultures, which often can come across as shocking. And we have the concept of culture shock. So what is culture shock? I will read. Culture shock. I lost it. Experiencing other cultures. Culture shock is a disorientation and discomfort experienced by individuals when they encounter a new and unfamiliar culture. And this phenomena occurs when people move or travel to a different cultural environment, especially one that significantly differs from their own familiar culture. The term is often used to describe the emotional and psychological impacts of adjusting to a new set of cultural norms, values, customs, and social practices. So usually when in class, when I talk about culture shock, I ask people their experiences of culture shock. So myself, when I came to Canada, I'm from a faraway village in Uzbekistan. That's where I was born in a Muslim community. So our culture was quite different than Canadian culture. When I came to Canada, one of the things struck me was how people were casually dressing. In certain cultures, people dress pretty formal, and my how I dress certainly influenced by my culture. So when I came here, I noticed how casual people dress, and first thing was like, without knowing anything, like why these people are so poor. I heard the Canadian people are, it's a developed country and supposed to be living way better than we did. And my question was why these people are so poor. So now thinking about that, I laugh because I didn't understand the Canadian culture. And today, like, I mean, after being here for so long, I understand culture way better. And another second thing was I would be walking on the street and people would smile or say hello as they're passing me. And that was something different for me that usually women are, kind of encouraged to be modest and don't look at people or don't smile to strange men, for example. And if when people said hi and smiled, I would look at myself and thinking like if something is not right with me. So that's kind of like an initial culture shock I had entering to Canada. So culture shock starts with a honeymoon phase that you are basically thinking of why and how this can be. It's where you are very interested in and want to see more of that. That's called honeymoon phase. And second phase is crisis or disintegration phase. That time you don't understand it. Like you can't fit in that culture in the second phase. And then you will slowly adjust to that culture if you are to stay longer in that culture. And then finally, like me, you will master that culture. You understand it well. You will become comfortable with that. And also you will start practicing that if you stay long time, long enough. So this is the kind of cultural exposure can feel like. And probably many of you traveled a lot in your life and or interacted with other cultures one time or another when people did something or cooked something or dressed in a certain way or maybe had weddings, you were probably like, oh my God, I've never seen that in my life. So that is basically a culture shock. And there are few things that I would like to mention about cultural relativism, for example. Those are how people can interpret cultural ideals or cultural artifacts, cultural beliefs and values. So basically, cultural relativism tells us that we have to understand the culture well to evaluate it or make judgment about it. So cultural practices, beliefs, and values should be understood and evaluated within the context of their own culture, not from the point of view of other cultures or judgments. This perspective argues that imposing one's own culture or cultural norms or values on another culture when studying or interpreting its practices is wrong. So if we don't understand the culture, we can misjudgment them. So basically, this is telling us that we should avoid ethnocentrism, which is like my culture is always the best, my culture is the right one kind of view. And we have that. Like, I mean, we can see for 100% that all religions say that my religion is the right one. So there's no room for accepting other religions. My religion is right one, therefore the other religions are wrong. And people can have that kind of belief towards cultures as well. We do this way and this is way the right way to do kind of view on culture. So understanding culture from within is a very important practice. For example, scholars are encouraged to know the culture well before we talk about that. And there have been many situations that some scholars evaluated certain cultures, for example, indigenous cultures, wrongly, therefore it was harmful for the culture. So cultural diversity is very important in our societies today, especially in the age of globalization. Recognizing and respecting diverse cultures allows us to interact better with other people or understand them as just they are different. They are just a different way of their way is a different way of living. It's not wrong or it's not open to judgment. It's just different, right? And being different's okay. And sometimes being different is good because you can say, for example, when it comes to Canadian culture, recently some of the arguments raised around Trump's like 51st state kind of push. There was like we are Canadians kind of rhetoric was developing and increasing in society. So I watched them and tried to absorb tried to observe how Canadians portray themselves, and being different, being diverse is Canadian, and Canadians are proud of that. So that comes with understanding different cultures. That comes with being open to different cultures. So this is a little bit about culture. Next, I would like to talk about socialization. Socialization is a lifelong process through which individuals, typically within a culture, within a society of culture or culture, learn and internalize the values, norms, customs, behaviors, social skills that necessary for effective functioning in our societies. It is a dynamic process. As in the beginning, I said the culture is something that belief systems and the socialization is a process. We cannot separate these two things together. We cannot transmit culture if there is no socialization processes that allows us to pass our cultures to the next generations and also study various types of stuff. Our education is also internalized, or our knowledge is internalized through socialization processes. It starts in the early childhood that everything we learn from people around us, that it's a family is a primary agent of socialization. So when the child is born, they start telling the child his or her name, and that is the first thing the child probably internalized. They will start to understand their name is Julia or John or whatever it is, and that's internalization process. Then they will learn how to hold a spoon and how to dress themselves, how to know the time, how to read and write. Maybe that's also educational system. So these are everything we learn from our family, the belief systems we have, the norms we have in our family, how to say hi and hello, how to speak our language. It's a process of socialization. Through the process of socialization, we internalize world around us. So the way over 90% of stuff we learn from other people. And also the rest of it is also influenced by other people. Our knowledge, the stuff we read, stuff we hear, stuff, the videos we watch, and the belief systems that's influenced by them. So through socialization, we can transmit our cultures. Our culture is strong and something continued for hundreds of thousands of years, that developed over the historical period, right? Yet it's fragile. If we don't practice it, if we don't pass to the next generation, it can die. So the socialization allows us to transmit our culture to next generations. If we don't show them how to cook that traditional food, our children will not know that. So that is important part of transmitting culture. It also helps us to develop our identity. Our identity is fluid and we change every day a little bit. Of course, you don't sense it, you don't see it all the time, but every time when you watch certain kind of video, if you come to sociology class and listen to a lecture, or if you read a book, if you look at outside and observe people, if you do certain practices, in the process you're developing your identity. So that internalization and externalization processes, which we talked in our first class, and you also watched a video, is a very important part of development of identity. Every time when you dress in certain way, when you do your hair, when you talk to people, when you put that smile on your face, and the way you wave your hand, the way you talk, all of them are the process of externalization. You just letting people know who you are, and the stuff you internalized already. You're talking about certain topics or ideas. For example, today I'm talking to you about socialization. While I am talking and externalizing these ideas and ideals, you are internalizing them. So this is the process of socialization. We acquire social skills through socialization. Everything we learn we learn through the process of socialization. You can become a doctor or physician. You can become a scientist. You can become an engineer through the process of socialization, the books you're interacting with, the videos you're interacting with, the teachers and mentors you're interacting with, just develops your social skills. So that is also part of socialization. And we internalize societal norms all the time. While we're walking on the street, we see everybody, how they're dressed, how they are doing their hair and everything. So therefore, we're internalizing what is a norm in our society. Taking a bus is a norm, and we will see people are doing that. Therefore, it's natural for you to just sit in your bus and get to your place, or driving a car, or for example, in Canadian culture, men and women wear pants and tops and suits, for example. In some cultures, maybe wearing pants can be wrong for women. They might want to wear a long dress, for example. And I'm not 100% sure that I'm not naming any culture. I can see certain cultures have religions, for example. Have Muslims have hijab, for example, and certain cultures might have turban they wear all the time. That is natural, that's part of their culture, which is not part of Canadian culture. It may not be natural for me to wear a turban, for example, or it may not be natural for me to wear certain kinds of cultural the clothes that the Canadians don't wear, or in my culture they don't wear. So the socialization is a very important factor in internalization of norms and values. So the agents of socialization can be anyone. However, primary agents of socialization is a family, your teachers, your mentors, they're your siblings. They are primary agents of socialization. Then there are secondary agents of socialization. Other people, your peers, your, let's say, media can be a secondary agent of socialization. So this is some of the ideas about socialization. So the agents of socialization changes over time. Socialization across lifespan can be different. First, for example, when it comes to children, they socialize in their homes with their parents and siblings and little friends, and then they will go to daycare and they socialize in the daycare, and then they go to education, to schools. They socialize with different groups of people in there. When they go to university or work, they socialize with their co-workers. And then socialization can be different for elderly people. They will have maybe smaller group of people or circle of people to socialize with. And that also affected by where you are and how is your financial situation is. Some people are born into big circles, like for example, let's say like movie stars. Even when they are older, their circle is huge. Depending on your life and depending where you are and where you are in your life and financial situation and what was your job as when you were younger, when you get older, your social circle can be different. And so the agents of socialization also can be different. And this is something a little bit about culture and socialization. In my next video, I'm going to talk about nature and nurture debate, which will be the continuum of this topic. Thank you for listening. I will see you in our next video lecture.